Our founders started the country after we won the Revolutionary War, and they started our country not with the Constitution, but with something called the Articles of Confederation. It set up such a limited government that the whole thing flew apart. You couldn't even do business across state lines. Our country was a total mess. Do you know who the first president of the country was? This guy. John Hanson. No, it wasn't George Washington. John Hanson. But see, I said our country. It's a different country. Under the Articles of Confederation, they first put it right here. It was too close to anarchy. It didn't work. It fell apart. Every state was fighting against each other, cheating against each other. It was too close to anarchy. So in 1785, Congress knew that it wasn't working. And unbeknownst to them, James Madison and Thomas Jefferson had been exchanging letters, and they were trying to work on a totally new system of government. They knew that they were never going to get something this radical past any members of Congress, any of the states, because nobody trusted anybody anymore. But they had this thing called a republic. It moved this government a little farther down, moved it to about here. But they needed somebody to help bring everybody together. They needed somebody that they could trust, that everyone in the room would trust. They needed someone who they knew would bring everybody together, everybody would trust, and in the end, would do the right thing, even at his own expense.
George Washington got a bunch of them together and said, we really need to look at redoing the Articles of Confederation, which led to the Constitutional Convention in 1787, where they did get together and they said, let's redo the Articles of Confederation. They looked at that and said, let's just scrap it and start again. And that's where we come up with the Constitution. When you look at the founders' idea for the nation, it was that the people would be in charge through a representative federal government. And out of the forms of government, the Founding Fathers went through and said democracy is worse than anything. It's worse than anarchy. Democracy is worse than a monarchy, and we know what they thought about monarchies. I mean, democracy was on the bottom of the rung because it allowed human emotions to get through. People make decisions when they're angry or when they're happy or when they don't have all the facts. So in a representative Republican form of government, everything slows down. And we complain about the pace of government, but that's really good because now you have to debate, you have to get two sides in there, you have to look at all the aspects, you have hearings on it to get all the information. It's a slow process, but it keeps the feelings and emotions out. But they wanted the people to have the power. The Constitution forbids America from becoming a democracy, and a federal government means that we share powers in a vertical direction. Thomas Jefferson, in his first inaugural address, he went through his president and said, the purpose of federal government is fivefold. And in his inaugural address, he listed the 5 things that the government was supposed to do. He said, number 1 is to acknowledge and adore God. Now, it's interesting, Jefferson said that, but they all believed that if you don't start with acknowledgement of God, you don't understand inalienable rights. Second thing is for government to exercise frugality. Frugality in spending and power and authority. Be a frugal government. He said third is to restrain the infliction of injury. Government exists to keep bad guys under control. It's not to regulate the good guys, it's to keep the bad guys from hurting somebody. He said the fourth thing government's supposed to do is to encourage entrepreneurship and free enterprise. Is to be business friendly and encourage, because that's where prosperity comes from, that's where jobs come from. He said the fifth thing government's to do is to protect property and the earnings of citizens. They considered the money you earned as your property, and they couldn't take your money away from you any more than they could take your house or your property or anything else away. And he said that's the fivefold purpose of government. Government exists for those 5 reasons. We've shifted so much away from what they envisioned, which was a small, limited government with 5 primary responsibilities, where that we, the people, were in charge of all 3 branches. That's what they wanted for America. And if we read and study the Constitution and get back to that plan, that's what's caused America to be the most prosperous, stable nation in the history of the world.
So why have we shifted so far away from what our founding fathers envisioned? Progressivism. That was it. Progressives really are the bane of the Constitution's existence. They view the Constitution as a living, breathing document that evolves. Well, okay, sounds like an interesting idea, but is that what our founders had in mind?
You know, a lot of folks today, progressives and social evolutionists, look at it and say, oh, the Constitution's flawed. It didn't take so many things into consideration. It needs to reflect a living document, living, breathing, we the people. I mean, who cares what they wanted 200 years ago? It's got to be a living, breathing document that reflects what we the people want. You know, they've just made the Founding Fathers' point. That's what the Constitution is a living, breathing document. But the point that's different from the Founding Fathers and progressives is who's in charge of the evolution of the Constitution. The Constitution itself says, now, we know that things will change and times will change and people want different things. That's why we're giving you Article 5 of the Constitution that allows the people to evolve the Constitution. You have to have 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate agree to an amendment, and 3/4 of the state have to ratify. So any change that's made in the Constitution, we the people made it. We're the ones that wanted it. We're the ones that ratified it. We the people said, you know, there's no term limits on presidents in the Constitution, but we want term limits on presidents. The Constitution did not abolish slavery, but we did in the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. See, we've evolved the Constitution 27 times, and it's always because we, the people, wanted to make a change. The problem with progressive is they want themselves to evolve the Constitution, tell the people what their values should be. Most of the things that the people that are progressives want the courts to do are totally out of line with the people. There's amendments that have come through that haven't necessarily been the best for the country, and the 17th and the 16th Amendment are two of those. Matter of fact, there's a great little poster out that says, 1913, the worst year ever. And you look at it and you go, well, that's when we got the 16th Amendment with the progressive income tax authorization. That's when we got the 17th Amendment, which abolished the election of senators by the states. That's when we got Woodrow Wilson inaugurated president.
The 20th century is a disaster for the Constitution, in large measure because of the way it began with Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, the way it moved up to FDR. The three of them together demonstrating publicly and privately utter contempt for the natural law, the concept that individuals have natural rights that the government can't interfere with, and the concept that the Constitution was written to keep the government off the people's backs. Teddy Roosevelt, his cousin Franklin Roosevelt, and their mentor Woodrow Wilson basically ushered in periods of government in which the government took the position that it could write any law, regulate any behavior, tax any event, and seek any goal, whether authorized or permitted by the Constitution or not.
The Constitution is really born out of the Declaration of Independence. You have no clue of understanding the Constitution if you don't have a good grasp on the Declaration. 85 words right up top that give you 5 fundamental principles of American government. Those five thoughts are real simple. The first one says, hey, we believe there's a creator. We in government believe that. Number 2, we believe that the creator gives certain specific guaranteed and alienable rights to man. And number 3, we believe that government exists to protect those specific rights. They say now below that there is a moral law. They call it the laws of nature. Nature's God. 8 words out of the Declaration that came from a law book of the day. That's the 4th point. And then they say below that moral law we have the consent of the governed. So those 5 specific things, you take those 5 points and move them over to the Constitution, and now you start understanding the Constitution.
Now let's watch as our own president is now omitting words from the Declaration. The president has given a speech where he's used a quote from the Declaration of Independence. He has omitted, I believe, the most vital part of the quote, and nobody understands why. This is not a small deal, and I want to explain. First, let me show you what he said the first time on September 15th. Here he is.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal,
endowed by their Creator, and
endowed with certain inalienable rights, life and liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, the glaring omission there is the one word, Creator. Okay, after we, and I'm sure others, brought it up, the White House insisted the comment was made on the fly. It was inadvertent. It wasn't in a teleprompter. Okay. The White House Deputy Press Secretary Josh Ernst talked about the incident, and he said that, quote, the president is in full agreement with the Declaration of Independence. Any suggestion to the contrary is just silly. Well, it's not. Woodrow Wilson said the Declaration of Independence was meaningless. So why is it silly now that this president, especially when he leaves out a very important word? It has nothing to do with religion, by the way. I want you to know that. We gave him the benefit of the doubt, except 7 days later, the president again, while speaking at a Democratic fundraiser, omitted the one word creator when referencing the exact same passage from the Declaration. The omission was part of a prepared transcript. Now, they didn't have any cameras at this dinner, so we had to go to the White House and get the transcript. Here is the White House transcript on what the president said. Quote, "If we believe that all people are created equal and everyone is endowed with certain inalienable rights, then we are going to make sure those words live." But he goes on, but it's pretty clear that this isn't being done on the fly. Or else there's a speechwriter at the White House that needs to be selling vacuum cleaners door to door. I'm just saying. This is not some sort of oversight. And here's why I feel compelled to talk to you about this tonight. The mail I get from people who are even on the right, who say, "Oh, just shut up about your religion, blah, blah." It's not religion. You must understand why every word was put in the Declaration. It is a very big deal. It is one of our critical founding principles that we do not get our rights from man. We get them from God. Why is that important? In the Declaration, they were very careful to make sure it wasn't Christian God or Jesus or Moses or anybody else. It was nature's God and nature's law. Why? Because they wanted to make it as broad as they could, but make sure that everyone understood it is from above that rights are endowed and they are unalienable, meaning they cannot be changed, they cannot be taken away. If God or the Creator is taken away, where do you get your rights from? If our rights come from other men, then men can take them back. This is about as fundamental of understanding of our liberty. It is essential. It is the reason I made such a big issue out of what Senator Tom Harkin said during the health care debate. Do you remember what he said? I think it was on Christmas Eve or something like that.
What this bill does is we finally take that step. As our leader said earlier, we take that step from health care as a privilege to health care as an inalienable right of every single American citizen.
Okay. Stop.
And as I've said before,
stop.
this bill does not...
Okay, look, Congress doesn't pass rights. They cannot pass rights. They cannot create a right. They pass laws. But this is an idea, a notion that permeates our government now. The rights our founders enumerated, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, have become instead the right to health care, right to a job, the right to a certain wage they deem decent, and the only way to provide those rights is to take your rights to the things you've earned. The problem is, these new rights were the rights outlined by Karl Marx and Engels, not our founding fathers. If that is the path we're going to take as Americans now, then let's have that discussion. Let's stop pretending that we're working from the same fundamental principles, because we are not. If the president, who is a constitutional scholar, if the president doesn't understand the critical word creator in the Declaration of Independence, we're not on the same page. And it has nothing to do with faith or God or anything else. It has everything to do with man seizing power. What is the code in the Constitution? It's easy. Do you think that was a font problem that somebody said, hey, scale it down, we the people, it's too big, it's not all going to fit on a page? No, that was code. They knew that it had to send a message. They knew people would get lost, they wouldn't know the answer, they'd get detached from the Constitution. Jefferson and Adams talked about it in their letters back and forth. So what did they do? They wanted to make a point. Hey, dummy, look, we the people is the answer.
I love the way that James Wilson said this. James Wilson, one of the guys who wrote the Constitution, he says here in America, he says the people are the masters of government. He says in Europe, the government is masters of the people. And that's the big deal. We the people was always to remind our elected officials and ourselves that, hey, government's here to serve us. We're not here to serve government.